Be sure to subscribe and like our channel. Well, it seems like, studio was already breaking up on the way in, so we are having some communication problems with our guests today. So we're just going to talk about necromancy ourselves. Who are we exactly? Who am I? Who are you?
The existential question. There's so many things, but we're at Queen City Curio, 607 Gerrard Street, 4th floor, 401, 402, Toronto, Ontario. So,
and we are Queen City Curio Videocast and Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. Live stuff happens. Sometimes guests cancel and don't tell us. That's okay. We're still going to talk about necromancy today, although we are echoing a little and we're having some sound issues. So it is what it is.
It is what it is. Let me check doors while you're talking and see what's happening.
When we move to a new location, we're probably going to try to make our own little recording studio so we can do more interesting stuff.
Oh yeah.
So we're a little behind for everyone listening. This is Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole. We're a little behind on the demon stuff, but we are starting soon. So if you're interested in the demon stuff, well, I've been working a lot of hours, but we'll get the page up there. We're going to have the first couple classes are just really to kind of get you up to speed on how to do the summoning, how to do elemental sort of demonology, sort of cleaning and cleansing, and how to keep yourself sane. Because if you're going to do a demon every 2 weeks, you got to learn how to keep yourself sane.
You totally do.
But we're going to change how the rituals work a little. So yes, we have our Sunday, beneficial rituals, although beam work can be very beneficial. It's more of a Saturday night ritual.
Mm-hmm. Sponsor link in the description for everyone if they want to be joining us for the demon.
Yep. If you join us as sponsors, you could totally attend the demon work, and we're going to have coffee and tea available, and it's a little bit of food for afterwards. Obviously, during the demon work, we're going to be a little focused on demons.
And somebody to Semaphorish too. We're doing that also.
That might be on Sunday. That might take over the Sunday slot.
Yes.
Like, okay, here's the demon. Here's the corresponding Semaphorish. Like, now you know how to bail yourself out if you get in trouble.
That's a good bailout too. People would be like, no. You totally want a balancing point, peeps. You do.
Yeah. Well, you don't. You don't need one. A lot of people don't need one. Some people do.
No.
So, but we're going to talk about practical necromancy. We did try to get a person on about necromancy, and they're not here. We don't know what happened. Stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're still going to be talking about necromancy though, and we'll change the title of the show later after the link goes up.
Well, it sort of happens that I know a lot about necromancy, and I'm not initiated in Palo, but I am initiated in Voodoo, which shows a lot of necromancy, and I know a lot about Palo. I think Palo has the most advanced, interesting necromancy. Though, if I could find an honest Palo priest, I might get initiated.
So, why do you think they have more advanced necromancy techniques? I mean, yes, they work a lot.
It's not so much more advanced. It's just interesting. I mean, you have to remember the pot in Palo is sort of a weird chimeric spirit.
Right.
So the mask, you take the mask of the dead, the veneer of the dead, and then you throw it in the pot, and the pot has various stuff like bones and a human skull and other woods and other. Literally, it's wood. That's what Polero means, wood. So it's trees, and you have a certain recipe to kind of build out the spirits. You can look that up. Right, all the secrets there is out there. The real experience here is that you're kind of using you're using the spirits of the dead and the talismans of a dead to provide a mask that's filled in by the gods.
Right.
Right. So it's not quite the gods, the angels, whatever you want to call it, but the dead fill in a mask of a personality close to sort of Orisha, which it's not Orisha, it's it's the power spirits, but it's sort
Right.
of like putting a mask, using the dead to put a mask over their power to filter it so you can better understand it. That's quite interesting, actually.
Right. So, in some ways, if I'm understanding correctly, then it's almost like the dead person acts as the avatar or speaker piece for the spirit itself, but they're closely aligned in personality, so they can
More
do
like
that.
an avatar. It is sort of like
Right.
an avatar, like a face.
Right.
But the battery and power source, and people can argue with me, but I'm a chaos magician, and you can send your hate mail to andriehvitimus@gmail.com. I clearly have dealt with this enough to know that that's what's going on. This is just, they wouldn't use these terms, but it is that way. The engine behind the mask is actually the actual greater spirit. What That's interesting because basically it gets to the point that I've always said for a while with necromancy is the easiest and closest spiritual evocation technique you can use, right? It's also the one that's the most forbidden by many religions, like Christianity and Buddhism and any others that I missed.
I think those are the main ones. Islam. I mean, basically, your Abrahamic religions are going to be really big.
Well, and
no-nos on
parts of
those.
Hinduism too, right? Unless you're a Shivite, I don't
Right.
think they're dead friendly.
Yeah, I mean, the Shavites would definitely be dead friendly, but the other ones not so much.
Yeah, I don't think so. So I think it's like a pretty common prohibition to be not friendly to the dead. So to you, but the dead are the closest and the easiest to understand to us. So if you have a dead that you're using as a mask for a greater power source, it's like you get the best of all worlds. Like you have a mask of a dead spirit, which obviously the dead spirit
Right.
knows how to interact in the human world. And then the power source to that spirit is something greater.
Right. So on the technicals then of that, it would almost be
Remember,
you
I'm
would
not
have
Apollo initiation, so
right,
we
but just
should
on
go
a
into Dallas
theoretical.
magic or voodoo magic, right?
Well, right. But even just on a theoretical piece, it'd be whoever's doing that discussion would almost have to broker a deal between the dead and the spirit then at that point, if they're going to go for the avatar.
That's pretty much what that's pretty much what the ceremonies do.
Right.
That's sort of what you're doing. You're brokering the relationship. Right. And then you're sending them through, like because generally, like if you can control that dead, then you can control the greater spirit.
Right.
I mean, that's often why like some sister religions view Palo Monte as like the most unethical. Although everyone I've seen in that who practices that are more ethical, they're just more willing to admit they curse people when other people are not more willing to admit that.
Well, yeah. Right. Given those, given the culture and the constraints economically, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Santeria is also, or Orisha worship is also that way, or Ifa, but they don't admit they curse people. Do you realize you have a microphone thing right over your face?
I thought it was hiding pretty well. Apparently not. There we go.
No, it was right over your mouth. It looked like you were a Borg.
Well, I did have the. Well, I mean, you know how we had the Bane mask going on for a while, so.
I do. But actually, like the dead in general, practical necromancy, like when we're talking about practical necromancy, I mean, there's two forms of practical necromancy, really. I think we can break it down culturally to two forms. There's your ancestors and there's everybody else.
Yeah.
I think most cultures would agree with that. There's your ancestors and there's everyone else. Your ancestors going to be easier to work with, maybe, but should theoretically be easier to work with. But everyone else, you get what you get, like
Well, right, and then that's in the context of a human dead. We're still not even talking about like animal dead or other things too. So
Right. We'll get to that. That would be a third thing.
right,
Animals or other dead.
right,
I think the ancestors are still the easiest, although I think a lot of people get in trouble with ancestor work too, because I haven't seen it in many places. It's not as quite as popular to say right now that you can get in trouble doing ancestor work, but realistically, you can worship the ancestors as an aggregate gestalt, where you just have an ancestor altar and you give offerings, and that's safe. I think that's relatively safe. You use blessing
that's
herbs.
relative safe. Yeah,
I mean, for my family, you use frankincense because of the connections that we had to Catholic Church, Eastern Rite, Orthodox Catholicism, right? But in general, frankincense is a good uplifting herb. Maybe if you
yeah.
prefer, you can use Palo Santo. There's a lot of
Camphor. There's a lot
camphor.
of
If
different
you're
ones.
Chinese culture, maybe you can use
Yeah,
Chinese mugwort.
right.
Right. You basically there's different altar configurations. I personally like the voodoo one, the simplified voodoo one, which basically just involves one glass of water to start off with, rocks that you gather from your area around the four corners. White, you can change that if your culture is more black, like Chinese. Black would probably, no, white would be death too.
No, white would be death. Yeah.
So, and then basically you could just kind of pray to the ancestors and see what you get. Now, generally speaking, what I tell people is, okay, that's the first lead, but the real useful things with the ancestors come when you start working with specific people. Because the thing is that if you are into magic pretty heavily, it's probably a good bet that other people in your family were also into magic. And that's when stuff gets real interesting. But to do that, you really have to get to the point that you can have multiple ancestors you kind of trust.
Yeah.
Like 3 or 4. And that might take a little while. Like they if you're an orphan or something like that, you might not have any. And then you might have to work through it, and then you get some names and you don't know if they're real, but they keep getting results. If they keep getting results, that's pretty good. Generally speaking, if you keep blessing the altar, like you keep giving good incense and just connecting with gratitude and just generally connecting in that way of positivity, the altar is positively attuned, and anything that comes there will have to pass through this positivity wave to get there. In practice, that's easy magic. Okay, so that means any spirits that come there probably is your family and is probably positive.
Yeah. And I mean, this is where, could people just do that, or do they have to call Lord of the Dead also?
No, for their own family in voodoo, you don't have to call your own. You don't have to call the parents. We'll get to that because right that gets very paradigmal, I think.
I see.
Because it wouldn't be the same in Chinese. Like in some traditions of hoodoo and conjure, you just call the dead up.
Gotcha.
And other traditions, you just call the dead up. I mean, I think that's the first stage is this ancestor thing where, okay, maybe you get 3 or 4 ancestors you could work with. Eventually, like I said, if you're really heavy into magic, somebody will step forward, like to say, well, I'm your aunt, great aunt, and I see what you're doing here. And I used to do that kind of stuff. And you should listen to me. Or something nicer. What?
Right. It'll be like, here's some ideas.
Something notifying you that kind of like, now some people would call that as your guardian. I think they use all kinds of terms, but really it's just who in your family is sort of like attuned to the type of magic you do. Somebody will come forward. It's very rare that you'd be the only person in your family that has that style of magic, even if you don't think people do magic. What people don't talk about, what you didn't know, comes out to pass when people die.
Yep. That they do.
So, like your protector or someone will come forward who's more magical eventually. I've kind of seen it for every single student I've had.
Mm-hmm.
I figure that's the point at which time, even if you're not necessarily working with voodoo, but you have that relationship with somebody like that, after you've gotten results from them a few times, then you can start working practical necromancy for spirits that aren't part of your family. But I think spirits that are not part of your family have no vested interest in helping you. So you're going to degrees of difficulty, right? Like, I prefer the negotiation way, where you're negotiating with these spirits, like talking to them. You go to the graveyard, maybe, get some dirt from their head after you ask.
Mm-hmm.
When you ask, you pay a little for the dirt, maybe 3 coins and some whiskey. If you want to if it's something you're looking to do with them intellectual, you take it from their head. If it's maybe something a little crasser,
mm-hmm.
you take it from their genitalia, if it's love magic or something like that. If it's something where you're like, they're somebody who made stuff, you might take it from their hands, from where you think their hands would be in the graveyard.
Right.
And then you just take as little as you need, and then you leave the offerings there. But that's a connection to that dead spirit, so you got to write that stuff down that you get. And you could double check a lot of this, because a lot of cemeteries have good records, at least in the United States and Canada.
Yeah,
right? So if you get the sense, mediumship wise, that, hey, this dead thing could help me because they were a millionaire, or they had a good small business, you can look up that person in the cemetery and records about that person after the fact, and basically figure it out. Now, oftentimes people are also looking for people who either committed suicide.
Mm-hmm.
That's because they're easier to control and they're more malicious.
Right.
Or people who are like murderers. Because if you get somebody who's a murderer, right, you can do bad stuff.
Yeah.
Or they'll follow directions. They will probably follow directions, and they're already willing to do murderous acts.
Right. Or soldiers, something like that.
Right. So that's like when people want to do bad stuff, they're looking for that kind of dead. Or people who committed certain types of crimes that. So if you're looking to hurt somebody, you have to find a dead that's willing to hurt somebody.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of, and the dirt that you'd get from them. If you're looking to make money, you have to find dirt from somebody who
makes money,
who knew how to make money.
Wow.
If you're looking to heal somebody, maybe you would find somebody who is a doctor, who's willing to work with you. And I think that, I don't know. I mean, it's not too hard to do that, but people do make it a little harder than you think. You can't always work with every spirit of the graveyard or every.
Yeah.
And like,
well, it's a personality.
Yes,
thing
you could.
there.
Right. Well, and you could pay your way into a cemetery, but Catholic cemetery is a little bit odder than public cemetery graveyards, right? So, with Catholic ones, you might have you might pay the way in with the Baron, and you might have to deal with other things,
right?
That'll check while you're there, because there's, if it's a public graveyard, not one. Jewish one's a little. Jewish one, you're probably not going to be able to get many of the dead out of there.
Yeah.
In practice, is like it's probably not happening.
Mm-hmm. So
I don't know. Weirdly speaking, like for me, it seems like even though it's forbidden, like Catholic cemeteries, because they're blessed, or Christian cemeteries, it's like they only want to go with baptized people. It's weird. That's been my experience.
Yeah, I don't
even
know
though what
about
they're doing is forbidden, but
yeah.
Maybe
just
not.
you've been consecrated and blessed. So
Yeah, I was too young to make that choice, so I don't really consider it that way. But yeah,
yeah. So I mean, there's the public pieces we talked about, like more, I guess you'd say, religious or paradigmal cemeteries too. What about the general? Was it where they do? I think I forget the term. Is it mausoleums where they have it, where they have the ashes of the people on the wall?
well, I mean, yeah, you're not going to get the dirt from that.
Right.
In which case, like, I don't know. What I usually do in
Photo.
practice, if you, yeah, a photo, I would probably give substitute dirt at that point.
Right.
Ask them to touch the dirt with their spirit, like, guide their spirit to touch the dirt or a rock.
Right.
That's like a stand-in, but again, that's going to be something where I think more traditionalists will say that doesn't work. I'd say as a chaos magician or a more practical modern magician that, yeah, it does work. You can get a spirit to reach out. If it's there, it's there.
If
You
it's
just
there,
ask it to touch the rock. You ask it to touch, like, give part of itself to the rock, if it's willing to make a contract with you.
Yeah.
But I think the graveyard thing is interesting because I think people make it too hard. I'm like, yes, you should make some offerings to the Baron or Mama Burchette or whatever paradigmal thing you want to work with. If it's a Kate, whatever, you could do. You could also make offerings to, T Bonds, which I might have got the name partially wrong, but it's basically the gate itself, right? But it's more like you're paying that so that way you don't have to necessarily pay, but you could enter into a shamanic trance, do the same thing where you're entering the sort of world of the dead. The cemetery is not the world of the dead. I think that's the big thing people get wrong.
Yeah.
The cemetery is just a physical place that corresponds to where the dead might be, but it's not the world of the dead. Like, you have to actually open it some way open to access the actual cemetery. Like, cemeteries by themselves probably the least haunted place.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, public cemeteries, you see that they're pretty much, most of them turn into like just normal beauty park type things, right? Where people just chill and relax.
Right. That's why you have to open. I think it's more of a vibrational shift. You have to shift your vibration to that of the dead. And then things will come around. Or you'll notice things. It's not so much that things are coming around. It's like in classics tales, they would say you were entering a different world.
Right.
And in a way, that's true. You are entering a different world. You're entering the world of dead. But in modern terms, maybe we say you have the correct resonance to pick them up and feel what's around.
Yeah, because
but
I mean, what was old times? There was a contact show, but there was a narrative already around that. Modern world, not so much.
The narrative was you open the gates of the cemetery and entering the world of the dead. Much more of a mythological sense. And in mythologically speaking, mythological logic, you are doing that. You are entering a different world, totally different rules than the normal physical world when you open the cemetery up, and the dead things will interact with you.
Yeah.
Usually like shades or other things, but in Eastern terms, when we talk about this and we open up the hell realm of the hungry ghosts, we're opening up the hell, or not so much hell realms, but the other realms of the dead. And in the layers of Buddhism, that's still opening up.
It's still
you're opening up the mythological, right? The Deadlands to enter them. Now, I think that's not totally free of danger.
Right.
And I think, at that point, you have to talk about the fact that you got to be a pretty good healer with this. Like, you can't just be some people can just be a necromancer, but most people I don't think can, because you're still being exposed to things that are dead.
Yeah.
Right? Your body, which is alive, is still channeling the energies and vibrations of dead things.
Right,
Generally
and
speaking, you
decay
have
and
to
all
be
that.
some decay, right? Right. Unless you're a pretty good healer or you got pretty good qigong skills or energy skills, you're going to get affected by the decay.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you start getting affected by the decay to a degree that your body doesn't like, it will shut that shit down.
Yep.
Like it will break you out of trance right then and there, and you won't be able to stay in a state of consciousness, or you won't be able to stay in their world.
Right.
I mean, it's more like about you can't stay in the residence because your body's like, yeah, you're getting sick, get out. But
Yeah.
it's saying that you get kicked out of their world is, I think it's a pretty good metaphor.
That's a pretty good metaphor. I mean, when your body is saying you're getting sick or it's hitting the alarm bells, well, yeah, you're not there anymore as soon as your body starts acting up.
Right, which means you have to actually have done enough healing or energy work that it doesn't bother you.
Mm-hmm.
Or you just naturally, it doesn't bother you. But that isn't everybody.
No, it isn't.
And then once you enter the world of the dead, right? Once you're in the cemetery as the world of the dead, or, treading on their grounds, right? Things can get attached to you very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And mess with your energy system if you don't have stuff like psychic shielding down, you don't have cleansing rituals, because this isn't your family anymore.
No.
I mean, it could easily be somebody who thinks you're just an easy ticket out of the cemetery.
Yeah.
Like a mark.
And I mean this is where, even from the healing point of view, we see a lot of dead attachments. So it's like, yeah, if you have any sensitivities, they're probably gonna think you're a mark and just go for you.
Well, I think most of the dead actually, they will attach to people who are psychically open, because we don't admit that people are psychically open, so they just attach because they think you can communicate. But just because you're psychically open doesn't mean that you can communicate. I think it's more like Poltergeist. Did you ever see that movie?
Yeah.
Where, okay, they're going towards the light. You're the light. You're a powerful medium, or you're a powerful spiritual being, but maybe you can't hear them.
Yeah.
Maybe you can sense their presence and make you nervous. But the fact that you can sense their presence and know you're there.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people who are dead, they don't always know they're dead, so it gets weird.
Right.
And then you have to have the conversation of like, oh, yeah, by the way, you're dead.
Yeah.
I'm not dead. Yeah, no, you're dead. You're definitely dead.
You're dead. You're definitely dead.
What do you mean I'm dead? I'm alive. I was just alive. I'm like, yeah, no.
No, you are not.
Didn't you watch your own funeral? Oh, that was just a joke. That wasn't real. No, it was real.
Yeah. Was it a Netflix show?
No.
Yeah. And I mean, at the point that people are doing the practical, we have the ancestors, then you have the dead that you can work generally with. I mean, at that point, most people can stop there, realistically. I mean, if they really want to do practical necromancy and they actually start finding people of the actual skill sets and researching, you're pretty much taking care of that if you want to just get practical.
Right. I mean, once you have the dirt, you can easily build gobies and talismans and poems out of them, or because you basically have the spirit and you can kind of listen to the spirit. What's either in resonance to that spirit enhances the talisman that you have. Mm-hmm. If it's in counter resonance, it decreases it. So from there, you can use divination and your sense of feeling to kind of augment it.
Yep.
Like let's say there's a rich spirit. There's one, I won't name the name because it seemed like I'm arrogant that we're trying to make an arrangement with this spirit. But let's say I have dirt.
Yes.
Say yes, they're a wealthy spirit. And they have some unfinished business for something they'd like to do. And let's say the wealthy spirit, I get the dirt. I negotiated the dirt. I went in there to open the cemetery. I got the dirt. I left the offering.
Yep.
Right. I start working with the dirt, and it's basically, it is increasing my money flow. Right. Let's say this is not a situation where I can go to the next place because they're wealthy enough that maybe getting their skull would be real hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. But I have the dirt as a starting point, right? I can kind of build a goby that's like a jar for them, and I can put their dirt in a little container and get other things that seem to resonate. Everything that seems to make their presence stronger makes the goby stronger, or makes the talisman stronger, or it makes, you can use a box too, right? It makes the box stronger, right? So if I have this whole bunch of stuff about, I have the dead rich person's dirt, and then I put some pyrite there, and everything feels really much more like money coming in. That's an additive thing that kind of helps. So then you can kind of add that together with the pieces that the spirit's willing to touch, and your body will tell you. You could use tarot too, or other divinations like Obi to kind of check that, but your body will tell you when it reacts like, hey, this is like, you feel it more. It's a good thing to add because it's basically compounding the talisman. So this is not like you just make a talisman and you're done. It's like you're in a relationship, and you're building that relationship with the things you're giving to the jar and that, or the box, and then you pretty much keep going from there. And then once you get to the place that you can communicate and there's a pretty good amount of power to it, you can ask the spirit to start doing things like get money, or do magic with the spirit in the necromantic box.
Well, right. So it's like, if it's a rich, wealthy spirit, a crown of success would probably be very good in resonance. Now, it depends on the spirit, obviously, right? Of said dead person. But I mean, that's probably, you would have to confirm that, but that might be something that resonates, or other things like the pyrite, as you were saying.
Right. I think most people think, well, this is not like a, it's not like a book spirit, because like book spirits, this is what you get for Goetia.
Right.
But you're working with an individual person. Like, you don't know what they
have taste, they have their likes. Maybe you do some investigative research on them, right? Talk to people
exactly
that knew them.
Right, if you can. If you can't, you got to do what I'm saying, this experimental thing. You kind of do one thing after another, and then kind of go from there. I think that's like kind of it's not so much hard, right? But it sort of requires people to do a little bit more give and take than they're used to with this kind of practical necromancy. It's not like a vending machine where you're just like, okay, here we are.
Ta-da.
Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's
there's some well, again, it's exchange, right? It's like, here's
it's
this,
definitely,
help me out on this.
And it's like a person, right? Like, as in, like, your relationship
it's a person,
with
literally.
Well, it was at one time a person, but I mean,
right.
But your relationship with the person is kind of like a person. Like, if you met, let's say you had drinks with a rich person. I mean, getting dirt is kind of like getting drinks. Like, it's your first conversation. You got to work up to asking for him to VC fund your next project, right? Like, it's got to take a little time to actually get there. Likewise, like, let's say you want to hurt somebody. You don't just go up to a guy in a biker bar and get them to like.
Right. Or if they do, there's a price. That's a pretty high price.
Right. You gotta get to know the biker guy who's going to be your thugtastic guy to hurt people. It's going to take a little while. Like, if you're working with a doctor, doctor might just help you because of the Hippocratic Oath and stuff like that.
And the ethics around that. But still, like, maybe not.
Yeah, it takes a little time. I mean, so, and you're right. For most, the vast majority of people, if you just did these things in a necromantic sense, you would go very far.
It would go very far with that. I mean, at that point, you'd just be like, yeah, cool. So I mean, yeah, at this point when we're talking about practices, is like one, going to the graveyard, talking to the dead. Two, then you have maybe mixing resonance, herbs, stones, other things that could work with the dead
Now,
better.
now we should talk about the talking thing, because I think that's also part of
Right.
the mediumship part people get wrong. And it's purposely set wrong, I think, by a lot of maybe authors.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't necessarily mean here.
Yeah.
It could just be your body will usually, for most people, I think it's body reaction.
Yeah.
Your body will have a positive reaction or a negative reaction. If it's a positive reaction, it's a yes. If it's a negative reaction, no. If you're having problems getting a body reaction, you can always throw OB, which is the 4 coconut shells, or you can do some divination. But still, there's going to be a body reaction almost always, right? You may not hear them at all until you get much later in the relationship, and then it could be sound like it's in your own voice. It's like seeing the spirits. Like, don't, just because you're not a rock star medium who can see the spirits doesn't mean you don't have mediumship technique tools. You can do it. Most people have some degree of mediumship ability. They know when shit is not right. As in, or they know when something's disturbing their environment. That's enough to start off with. Whether it's just a cold chill or whatever, they know. I mean, you don't have to necessarily have John Edwards conversations with people to get good results, right? You know,
You do not. You do not. I think that's a Hollywood piece. It's like everyone's like, oh, I want to have the clairaudience and clairvoyance piece, but that may not be everybody.
No. And I think at this point we should have a long conversation about the more difficult stuff, maybe for the last 15 minutes, which is the shards.
Right.
So usually when you pay a spirit to come back, with you, that's mostly a complete spirit who probably has some unfinished business or something. However, that isn't the most common thing you probably see. The most common thing is these things that don't quite have full personality structures, like dead shards, and they're like parts of the dead. Now, these things are way more dangerous. So if you think about what happens when someone dies, like their personality doesn't degrade after death at the same speed. All parts don't degrade at the same speed. And if the funeral rites weren't correctly done, completely right, parts of the dead will degrade faster than others. So you might have their lust go away first, but their hate go away a lot slower.
Right. Because it's degrading at a different rate.
Or it could be that they split from each other because the person's dead and the funeral rituals weren't quite right to kind of bury everything together. And then so you get these little things that look like goblins or monsters or little negative creatures that actually can grow into negative creatures.
Right.
And gather them up and kind of feed them just like you would any dead, but they don't have the sentience of a whole being. Now, those things are kind of useful because you can build stuff like out of them, like I don't know, like little.
Well, I mean, you could build stuff out of them for purposes.
Yeah, I don't want to say like making servitors because they're not quite servitors. But you can certainly feed them and kind of grow them, but they don't have the sentience or intelligence. So they are more like animals. And if you tell an animal that's trained to go attack someone, it will.
Yeah.
Or if you go kind of put this in someone, they will have an energy drain. And if you kind of loop it back to you with the talisman, you can get stuff from that. So it's like a type of vampirism. And believe it or not, we see that a lot.
Yeah, we do.
Not that people have actually done that, but that people have these little shard things that attach to the part of their negative emotion inside of them and kind of stir up the one emotion and sort of vampirize or eat that one emotion that's usually negative.
Yep.
And then you have to basically sort of remove it
Oh.
and fix it so that it doesn't attach again.
Oh yeah, that gets into the psychic surgery pieces.
But if you have good healing work, you can actually kind of bring those forward and force yourself to seal yourself off through psychic shielding, and then basically hold one of those things and kind of see what it sort of responds to as far as
Stimulus.
which motion, which stimulus. Yeah. So if you get then from there, once you get the stimulus down, everything evolves, or there's a general principle that all spiritual things evolve constantly. And as you keep feeding it, maybe you kind of feed it a little bit of other stuff too. It starts evolving and getting more sentient as it's interacting with you, because it's sort of mimicking your consciousness then, because you're interacting with it. And basically build this sort of not full spirit of the dead servant.
Right.
Now, Taoism, they might take those things after a while and actually put them to their bone.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that. So
yeah, you bind these to your organs or your bone and kind of one or the other, and then kind of feed it with doing qigong constantly, and then kind of pull it in and then keep feeding it. And it's eating your qi, so it's growing, but as it eats your qi, it kind of gains more sentience because it's eating your energy.
Yeah. Well, and then that gets into, from the Taoist perspective, then it gets into they become part of you because they're eating your own energy, but you can work with it. So it almost becomes like a mini avatar you in those contexts, because you're the one feeding it, consistently you.
Yeah, they do tend to mirror you then at that point.
Yeah.
That's true. And I mean, which is good. I mean, because that's what you want for a server to start doing, is sort of mirroring you. But you have to have good qigong skills for that. Otherwise, you get sick.
Yeah, you will. Yeah, absolutely.
Good energy skills. Like you have to keep popping energy into your system. Oh, we only have two people watching, so that's fine. I thought we were doing a more interesting job, but we can't help it that our guest canceled out. I think we gave some good techniques today.
Oh, they were pretty awesome techniques. I mean, very useful right away.
A lot of that stuff with dead people get in trouble simply because they don't do enough energy work.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't start from an energy deficit. You got to get in there and get the energy up to speed. And then if you do, most people won't have problems.
Yeah, because death is innately decay. So
right, you have to counter the decay. Or you have to have more energy solidity than the decay. Right, so your general energy system has to be more solid and compacted with energy than the presence of the decay.
Yeah.
Which is probably, that's not that hard. I mean, like a half hour, 20 minutes of qigong a day, or just having done magic for a little while, or even LBRPs, you're going to be okay. But you just got to have built it up for a little while before you start.
Well, it's build it up and then cleanse yourself after too, right?
Right. I'll say the ancestors. You're probably okay with the ancestors. They, as long as you keep the positivity range up with them, you're not going to have to worry so much. Like I said, it gets a little different in the forest. And as the last thing, it gets a little different with animal spirits because they don't even have human intelligence again. So it's getting to like similar to these shard things where they respond to certain types of stimuli. And once you figure that out, you kind of feed them and they get smarter. They grow into smarter and smarter things with the offerings, So even the spirit of a dead wolf, for instance, you could feed it and it'll start getting more and more intelligent as you keep making offerings to it. But it takes a little time at first. At first, you do have to watch yourself. You have to protect yourself because it's an animal, right? And then basically like it has to learn to trust you.
Well, yeah, and that gets into what type of animal is it? Is it carnivore? Is it or
Yeah,
herbivore?
I mean,
All
well,
these
you
types
use
of
the
things
wolf
make a big
example. Yeah,
difference, right? Because at that point, it's again the animal traits. If you're working with an animal spirit, you're trying to get those traits working with, well, the animal itself. So you gotta kind of know what you're dealing with there on some level.
yeah. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things like you take the untrained spirits of the dead animals and kind of maybe mix it with some sap of a tree or something and throw it in
Yeah.
with water and put it with the image of the person to
Well,
connect and
yeah,
basically start dragging, have them be the prey and the predator.
right. And even on
A
the
lot of spells like that. A lot of spells like that. Yeah, I mean, which they all to me
yeah.
make that all makes sense. There's just
Mhm.
variants of the theme, like what we talked about.
Yeah, it's very into the theme, and then it goes into, quid pro quos of, we're talking about practical necromancy, but if you're going to the graveyard, you should know your basic safeties too. Like, when does a graveyard close? Know what is happening around you, all that type of stuff.
I mean, right, right. But that should be said, but it's kind of like um, people would be shocked at the things that happen in graveyards, right? Like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can think of times when I've gone to the graveyard and animals get possessed by the dead, and I'm like, when I'm putting out offerings.
walk right up to you.
Yeah.
Should be afraid of people, but they walk right up to you and take the food.
Hmm.
Well, also people can get possessed by the dead, and that if you've angered the dead in a cemetery,
Oh, you'll know. You'll know.
and you're in a little bit of a not as nice area, yeah, you can get in a lot of trouble. So
Hmm.
these kind of safety concerns actually are a value point. You should know the exits. You should know the time the cemetery closes. You should know how to get in and out of the cemetery before you start doing work in the cemetery. You should know how many times the cemetery is being uh, patrolled.
Well, yeah.
Like
And
how
even
patrolled is it?
right, how patrolled it is, and even like what type of animals like could frequent it. Because even the one
Right,
graveyard I
right,
went
right.
to, it's like, you know, deer are not animals you want to fuck around with.
No, they're not.
They are
That'd be
not.
a lot worse if we were a little further north and it was bears, right? Then it'd be like,
Right.
oops, angry spirits of the dead took
Yeah,
over a
no.
bear spirit. No, no.
No.
That's
No.
just tangible. I mean, that's really just tangible safety things. Know the exits, know the ins and outs of the cemetery. Visit the cemetery before you try to do magic to the cemetery. I mean that.
Hmm.
I mean, it's never actually said, but it's a great point, Zach. Yeah, like
Yeah.
go check out the gates. Go drive around the cemetery or walk around the cemetery before you try to enter the world of the dead. Know what animals are out there. How many times it gets patrolled, right?
Yeah.
Just a just an information sort of what kind of workings that you can do. Like if the graveyard's being patrolled, like the last thing you want to do is
Yeah.
you know
Go on
light
out, get out of the car
take a
and light
live
stuff.
chicken. Yeah, take a live chicken when you're lighting on fire in the graveyard to make a angry chicken spirit at the job, right? You don't want to do that in a graveyard that's
Nope.
really heavily
Being
patrolled. I can't.
patrolled.
Right, there's no graveyards in Toronto where we could do that kind of magic per
Oh, hell
se.
no. Hell no.
Right, because people picnic right there. What are you going to do? Light stuff on fire or kill animals in the cemetery? It's not happening, right? Like
It's not happening.
you got to know what's the kind
Yeah,
of
I know the
stuff that.
deal.
And actually, to go back to well spirit, they would be offended if you did that kind of stuff around them. So at least the one we're
Yes.
working with, they
Yeah,
would
yeah.
think it was tacky. So you have to know what you're trying to do when you go in, and then kind of
Hmm.
have some good ideas. It's just a general good idea to make a relationship, and part of the making a relationship with the cemetery that you're working with is to go there
Yeah.
and actually learn about it. I probably have more practical necromancy stuff that we didn't cover, such like, I mean, you could put spirits of the night into dolls. That's pretty
Yep.
typical.
Dolls, combo that with Lords of the Dead work with the dead.
Yep, yep. Although, like I said, all that again, you have to have basically the energy work down enough that you don't get sick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's probably the biggest thing. One of the bigger fundamentals is having enough energy, doing the basic energy work, and having, if it's not energy work, at least healing magic of some sort, even if it's with the herbs and other things to kind of patch you up.
Yeah, I mean, because I know like everyone thinks these things, but the shards, particularly the dead shards we're talking about, are animal spirits, which could be very useful. They ain't gonna what do you call? They ain't
Nope.
human. I think it's safer if you do have ancestors in that graveyard or relatives.
Yeah. No.
I think so.
Yeah. It
Because
makes a
generally
difference.
speaking, your ancestors still going to act as protection, especially if you have a relationship with them. So there's still, once you go into the cemetery, even you open the gates and enter the world of the dead, they're still going to come around you.
Yeah.
So there's some buffer if you have ancestors right there. Although you can take your ancestors, a couple of the ancestors, or make
With you,
talismans for
yeah.
your ancestors with you when you go to the graveyard, or your protective guardians with you, which would be a good idea. But yes, if your ancestors are graved in the cemetery, you not only have a right to be at the cemetery, you have a double right as a family member. Sort of like it's harder. In general, you have a double reason to be there.
Yeah.
So it's always going to be a lot safer. You have motive. You have the why done it.
Yeah.
Your family's buried there. So nothing else really
matters. That guy trumps everything.
It does in a way.
Key to the home. You got a key to the home.
Right. I mean, you should always, when it's your ancestral graves, it's even more like that whole cemetery is tied to you from the start. Those are the easy cases.
Yeah.
Some of us don't live in the cities where we were born and ancestor graves are in, or countries.
Yes. That's when the talismans come in.
All right. What do we have coming up besides the Goetia, which we're going to start soon?
Goetia starting very soon. Tomorrow we got the how to communicate with.
Wait, go run get a talisman so we can show like the talismans we got.
Sure.
You got the app? You got one? Like these talismans we got all 72 of them. We made there's one.
There's one.
Right there, the slate talismans. No, that's good enough. Slate talismans. So if you come down to the center, we're gonna bless them, but guess what? After they've been blessed through a ritual,
you get to use them. Everyone that's a sponsor.
Your sponsor, you can come in and use them.
So
that's it, right? If you're a sponsor, you can come in and use the talismans that are actually been blessed by the demon. And we have more than 72.
We got more than some 72.
Demons. There's some demons from the Grand Grimoire.
Yeah. So I mean, we're gonna have a chest for that. It's going to be decked out. Decked out.
And because of our Jack Cole landlord, we are working on. We're almost ready to set up the public temple, to have a whole room that's just a public temple. That'll be for any spiritual work you want to use, whether it's ancestral work, Buddhism work, and the Goetia seals will be in there for people. If you want to use them. Now, granted, you might have to ask us to open a door, but you could still use them.
Yeah, no.
That's probably
that will be coming soon.
Maybe, but demon works such that we were earlier talking about it. We usually do stuff on Sunday. We try to usually do not stuff when we're doing acupuncture.
Yeah.
Me and Zach talked and we're like, yeah, we should just do the demon work Saturday night and then have hot pots.
Saturn's Day on the dark night time.
Right, and then do hot pots.
Yeah. Because nothing says demon work like a hot pot or a meal after.
Well, you summon a demon, you work, and then you have a couple of teas and coffees and drinks, and have hot pot or not hot pot or like potluck.
Yeah,
hot pot though. That's hot easy. Pot. Yeah, yes. I mean, so it's good.
It's
right?
all good.
Demon work plus social work, right?
It'll be like the after hours cafe. That's what we're going for.
Exactly. I mean,
We'll get
and
some
then we
t-shirts.
basically, for the people who are a little more light inclined, we do have some other classes coming up. Like tomorrow, we have a how to contact a goddess.
Yep.
We're going to teach you basics of how to make initial contact with a goddess you're interested in working with. I mean, for the guys, if you want to work with her, or women, if you want to work with a god, we'll go through the basics of how to kind of frame that relationship and start it out.
Yep.
And then following that, what do we have going on?
Following that, we got shamanic feng shui workshop 2 weeks after, and then the ritual is going to be a Goetia ritual, and that will be on the Saturday.
That will probably be a sort of introduction to the Goetia
Introduction.
ritual,
Yeah.
like how you call the quarters, how you
What are the quarters for the spirits, or
and why you do it,
the
because we're taking a demonology approach, not a ceremonial magic approach for the demonology. So it's all the demonology stuff. It's not very like threatening to the demons or stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it is not.
Which is much more mutual win, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and then basically we might not. I mean, we will do a summoning, but it'll probably be working through the basics of how you actually set this up, how you kind of set it up, why you need to do that, like some basics of evocation, and then maybe we'll try one.
Yeah. So fun times for all the sponsors. Fun times. What? Let's see.
It's definitely not going to be in the style of JSK, because I don't like him.
No.
But our general Goetia style is more in line with Stephanie Reiser's, and basically is definitely more shamanic.
No.
Now, usually I wouldn't talk about living authors, but he's dead, so I don't care.
Speaking of a necromancy show, right?
He would not be on my list of people to summon.
Nope. So there you go.
But it's definitely close. Me and Stephanie are really close on the same, not exactly, but we're much closer. And our style is much more of a combination of Barden and demonology techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we will be making spirit boxes, which I know he does. But that's a common thing too. So it's not just him.
Yeah, it's very common. All right.
So a combination of the evocation is a combination, more closer to a combination of hands-on cast magic and Barden. And then the general ritual framework is closer to Stephanie's, but how you do the evocations there, and then how you make the spirit boxes is probably, you know, similar to other spirit pots.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to Bear Animals, yep, her, who we've had on the show several times.
Yeah. And was a co-host with us. So
yeah, occasionally, yeah.
All right. So as you see, we got a nice lineup coming in. If you are not a sponsor, there's the links there in the chat. You'll see that in the video description and comments. And then we'll see everyone next week, where we're actually going to be continuing the theme around necromancy. So we're going to be working particularly on the topic of dirt, right? So that's going to be
which we started talking about today.
Yeah, that's what we started talking about. So there you go. So with that, stay safe, stay healthy, everyone, and we'll see you next week.